Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies in their diapers, welcome to the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy!
That's me, Tiberius!
Today, we're going to talk about some very awesome stuff. We have a video about dancing with the fire and ice, a book about making up your own words, and we have a totally awesome guest. Today we have the one, the only, the amazing Dr. Kevin Payne! Kevin is a professional skydiver and is a doctor that has chronic health conditions.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Tiberius. I'll try to live up to that enthusiastic introduction.
Well, you're welcome. And today we're going to start off with the video of the week, and this is going to be a dance.
And now it's time for the video game of the week.
Well, now it's time for the video game of the week. Today's video game is a Dance with Fire and Ice. This is a game on the Steam platform. It was made by 7th Beat Games. You may remember 7th Beat Games from their other game, Rhythm Doctor. This is a great rhythm game.
I wish I still had a good sense of rhythm.
Wow. Well, first off, I love rhythm games. And my dad really does not like them because he can't keep up with the 5, 6, or 9 key system. Well, in fact, there's only one key to press. You can press a number of the keys on the keyboard, and it still counts as the one and only key that you need to press. What's cool is that instead of arrows coming down, you are on a map that has 2 planets. One represents fire, and the other represents ice. They circle around each other and move forward when you press the key. If you keep to the beat of the music, you are able to run around the entire map.
Wow.
Well, I really like the complex beats where they have like 1/3 and even 1/6 of a beat. I also really like that you can make your own songs and maps for other people to try and beat. I did get my dad to try for a while, and he did get to the 3rd world. I finally beat the game, and it was so much fun. I find it very relaxing to listen to the music and tap to the key with the music.
I grew up a musician, so I love keeping the beat with things, but my hands don't necessarily work as well as they used to, so those games are really tough for me.
That makes sense. Well, I give a Dance of Fire and Ice 10 out of 10 stars because I really like that I was not amazing at it right out of the gate. It took some learning, and it's fun to have a challenge.
Challenges are great. I know we'll be talking about that later.
The Tiberius Show would like to thank one of their dedicated sponsors, Custom Designs Orlando. These guys are on Mills Avenue and do all sorts of stuff, ranging from photo ID badges, engraved signs, custom braille ADA signs, vinyl lettering to trophies and awards. The cool part about Custom Designs is they can ship products all over the United States. You can reach them at 407-898-0373 and tell them that
Tiberius
sent you.
And now it's time for the book of the week, Frindle. This book is written by Andrew Clements. Let me read you the back of the book. In fact, Kevin, would you like to do the honors?
Sure, I'd love to. Is Nick Allen a troublemaker? He really just likes to liven things up at school, and he's always had plenty of great ideas. But it looks like Nick's days of classroom shenanigans are over, thanks to his no-nonsense teacher, Mrs. Granger. That is, until Nick learns an interesting tidbit about how words are created. This inspires his greatest plan yet: invent a new word. From now on, a pen is no longer a pen. It's a frindle. But what happens when the word starts to catch on? Around school? Around town? Suddenly, frindle doesn't belong to Nick anymore. The word is spreading, and there's nothing Nick can do to stop it.
Wow. Well, this is an arrow book that's worth 2 points. It's rated for 5th grade and 4th month. Well, this is a great book that we read in class about a kid that's kind of like the class clown, like me. So
I can't believe you're like that.
So Nick Allen was a good kid, and his teachers were great until 5th grade. His teacher did not like anyone. She was so mean, she gave the students 35 words to memorize and their definitions each week. Then Nick and his friend Janet were walking home, and then Janet dropped a ballpoint pen, and Nick picked it up and said, "Here's your Frindle." Wow, he just made up his own word. Soon, other people heard about the word. Some were friends, and then the store owners, and even people on the streets. But the teacher did not like it and wanted it to stop. Oh no, what will this do?
Well, we make up words all the time, so
True.
it's not that bad.
That is true. So who knew this would start an all-out war between the students and the 5th grade language art teacher? Now, if you want to know how it ends, well, you just have to go and read the book. It was very worth it. I give Frindle 10 out of 10 stars because I really liked the story, and in my school, the whole 4th grade read it to get ready for 5th grade, I believe. Well, Nick reminded myself of me, and I think everyone should have their own Frindle.
I think that's a good idea. Hey, let me ask you a question about that book real quick.
Mhm.
Did it tell you the word for making up a new word in the book?
No,
'Cause there's a word for that.
it
The
didn't.
word for making up a new word is neologizing.
Wow.
And a new word, when you just make it up, is called a neologism. English has words for everything.
Cool.
Over 40 years, Lighthouse Central Florida has provided education, independent life skills, and job training to thousands of Central Floridians who live with blindness or any degree of vision loss. Whether it's picking out clothes in the morning or just moving around your community and serving Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, contact Lighthouse Central Florida at 407-898-2483 or visit them online at lighthousecfl.org.
And now it's time for the interview of an interesting person. Today's is going to be so much fun. Today we have the one, the only, the amazing Dr. Kevin Payne. Dr. Kevin is a professional skydiver and is a doctor that has chronic health conditions.
That pretty much sums it up.
Wow. So first off, how are you enjoying being on the show?
I'm having a great time, Tiberius. You are an excellent host. I think you've got a great future here.
Okay, so I have to ask. It says that you were an expert skydiver, but also a doctor. How does a doctor become a skydiver?
It was a long and winding road. So, first of all, I wouldn't say that I would never claim to be an expert skydiver, not in the same way that I am, say, as a social psychologist. But I do have several hundred jumps. I've got all the licenses. I've got a coach rating so I can help teach people. And I'm working on my pro rating, which will allow me to land in stadiums and, like a football game
Yeah.
and do that kind of thing. So I'm doing the best that I can with it. It's something that I really love. And for me, when I was younger than you, as a kid, I went to an air show with my grandmother, and this is like 45 years ago.
Wow.
And skydiving was still pretty rare at that time, and it was new that skydivers were jumping the rectangular parachutes that we see now. Those are called ram air parachutes, and skydivers, we call them squares. And before that, we just had the big round parachutes. And you can't really do much fun with the big round parachutes.
Yeah.
You just kind of drop out of the sky. But with a ram air parachute, it's got two layers of fabric. Yeah. And so it inflates and it looks like a glider and it acts like a glider. So you can actually steer it and fly it. And so I saw this guy do this and I was just amazed. I thought this is the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I wanted to be a skydiver.
Wow.
So then cut, forward to a few years. You've got to be at least 18 to start skydiving training. And it was a few years after that. I was in my mid-20s and I was working on my doctorate in grad school. And I decided I've waited long enough. I want to start the training. So I found a drop zone. A drop zone is what we call a place where you do skydiving. So it's an airport that has, everything set up to do skydiving. So I found a drop zone and it was a couple of hours away, and I went and I did the first training. Now back then, tandem skydives, you've seen pictures of like people doing their first skydives where the new person is strapped onto the experienced skydiver and they go out together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that wasn't really yet a thing. That had only been invented in the 80s and it wasn't really common. So back when I started, you had to do all the training and go out by yourself on your first jump.
Oh no.
And it was a pretty scary experience, but you had to go through that in order to, start skydiving.
Wow.
So I did, and I got a bunch of, a handful of jumps in. I got in about 13 jumps altogether, and then a lot of life got in the way. Profession, and then kids, and then my health got in the way, and I got to a point in my life where I thought I was never going to get back to this. But in 2019, after I'd gone through a really bad time with my MS, I decided I'm going to do something just for myself, and I'm going to figure out a way, even though my legs are kind of wonky and I'm always in pain and I'm always fatigued, I'm going to figure out a way to do this. So I did. I went back in 2019, and normally it takes you 25 jumps to get your first license. That's your A license in skydiving. And it took me 47, almost twice, because my legs don't really want to do what I want them to do all the time. And when your legs are weird in freefall, it starts your body spinning around really fast and you start tumbling out of control. And so it was a lot of challenge to overcome, but I had a lot of good people who worked with me, and we went to the vertical wind tunnels. Have you seen those where people do like indoor skydiving? So we went to one of those, and I spent a few hours in there with people on my legs helping me understand, well, this is how it's supposed to be. Even though I can't feel my legs below my knees, I learned how to feel the tension behind my knees.
Wow.
And so with a lot of extra work, I figured out how to do it and got my first license. And then in 2019, I went and logged another about 100 jumps or so that year. And in 2020, I decided I'm going to set myself a real challenge. I'm going to break 500 jumps, and I'm going to jump better than one jump a day for the entire year. So I did, and I managed 370 jumps in 1 year.
Wow.
And that took me over 500, and that's where you can get your last license in skydiving. There are 4 levels of licensing, and the last licensing allows you to do all the rest of the stuff. So I did that, and I got my coach rating during that time so I can help teach people and be useful around the drop zone.
Nice. So now you can teach other people to skydive?
There's 2 levels to the teaching. So the very first teaching, so your first maybe 8 or 10 jumps is done with someone with an instructor rating. And the first part of skydiving is teaching you how to jump safely by yourself. So you're going to be jumping with other people, but they're not attached to you. They're hanging on to you at first, and then they're flying nearby.
That makes sense.
And so first there are 2 instructors with you, then there's 1 instructor with you, and then once you pass the instructional jumps, the next part of your student training are called coach jumps. And that's when someone with the coach rating can come in, and we help teach you to jump safely with other people.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I get to help out, and if somebody hasn't jumped for a long time, like you've got, depending on your license, you have to jump every few weeks or every few months, or you're not current any longer. So you have to go up on a coach jump with somebody like me who can confirm that you can still remember how to jump safely.
That makes sense. So what is the best part about skydiving?
Wow, everything is great about skydiving. Because when, first of all, skydiving is a scary thing,
That makes sense.
but we don't have to be scared. We can reframe it. We can be excited. We can recognize that it's a challenge, but we're up to that challenge and we don't have to fail. So skydiving is a mental sport. You have to learn to do something that's pretty scary in the face of your body and your brain, you know, your primal brain telling you, oh, this is really scary, we shouldn't be doing this. So when you jump in freefall, you don't feel like you're falling. You feel like you're floating.
Like
So
flying?
yeah, so you're weightless. And then, I mean, you've seen pictures of skydivers like on their bellies,
Uh-huh.
like belly to earth. Well, when we take our arms and we move our arms back to our sides, kind of like we're Iron Man, and we extend our legs, right? So now what happens is on your belly, you're going about 120 miles an hour toward the earth. But when you sweep your arms back and you extend your legs, you shoot forward in the sky, suddenly at closer to 200 miles an hour. So you suddenly accelerate from 120 to 200 about in less than a second. And that's an amazing feeling.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So are you worried about something that could ever go wrong?
Well, you know, when you're trained to become a skydiver, you're trained to assume that something is going to go wrong, because eventually on a skydive, something will go wrong, and you have to be prepared to handle it. That's why, like here, I'll show you a parachute here. So I've got this parachute over here. You can see
Oh,
it's
wow.
all out of the rig right now, and this is my parachute rig, and you can see the main parachute would go down here in a bag, but it's out right now. But this top part is a second parachute.
Just in
That's
case
called
the
our
first one doesn't go out.
That's right. That's called our reserve parachute. And so all skydiving rigs have two parachutes in them. And then they also have one of these. So if you see this little computer right here that's called an AAD, an automatic activation device.
So it's kind of like on the top of the backpack.
Uh-huh. And I mean, some of them are in different places on the rig, but
That's right.
that's where mine is on this one. And what that does is,
It's a tracker?
if for some reason my parachute is not out, and mine is set for an advanced skydiver, so at 900 feet above the earth, that means that's about 5 seconds from impact. If my parachute is not yet out, it will automatically open the reserve.
Ah.
So that's like the last fail-safe.
Ah.
So we've got a lot of safety gear. We always jump with altimeters so that we know exactly where we are and how, you know, and so I've got an altimeter I wear on my wrist, sometimes one that I wear on the rig, depending on the kind of jump I'm doing. I've got one in my helmet that tells me audible signals, so I hear different sounds when I'm at different altitudes, and it also has a visual set of LED lights on my visor of my helmet, so that I can see exactly where I'm at as well, because you always have to be altitude aware.
That makes sense. So what's the hardest part about being a skydiver?
The hardest part is you. You have to learn to overcome these natural fears, because there's nothing natural about flinging your body out of an airplane 3 miles up. And so you have to learn to reframe your fear and to be in a circumstance where there's a lot of stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty stressful to be doing that, and still operate well. And so, skydiving is a dangerous activity that can be done safely, and it's up to you to be safe, because nobody else is going to save you on a skydive.
True.
You have to save yourself. And that can be a really powerful thing to learn when you can do that.
Okay, so it says in your bio that you are a social psychologist as well. Can you explain to my listeners what that means?
Yeah, I study people. I always wanted to be a scientist, and I found that the thing that I like studying the most are people. So a psychologist studies individuals, and a sociologist studies groups and organizations and societies. And so social psychology is right in the middle. It studies the person in the situation. So how do we act in different environments? And for me, what I've been focusing on for especially the last 10 years is can we focus well? How can we do well when we're in a distressing circumstance that we can't get away from, like living with a chronic illness, when your body doesn't do what you want it to do.
So how does being a social psychologist make the world a better place?
Well, humans have a lot of misunderstandings about why we do what we do. And social psychologists are scientists that try to help us better understand why people act like we do, so that we can build better societies and make better decisions and have better quality lives.
Okay. So you have chronic health condition called multiple sclerosis. Can you explain to my listeners what that means?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Multiple
Yes.
sclerosis. It's one of those that a lot of people have heard of, but they don't really know what it is. And in short, so inside our bodies, we've got our brain and we've got our spinal cord, and that's kind of the center of our nervous system, right? And so everything we think, everything we feel, everything we do, everything we say runs through that computer that is our brain and our spinal cord. And in multiple sclerosis, what happens is all of those wires, many of those wires in our central nervous system are covered by a protective coating called myelin, and it's this fatty kind of substance. And just like the wires in your house have the coating around them to keep them from short-circuiting and to help the electricity go from one point to the next, well, our nerves have myelin. And in multiple sclerosis, our immune system is attacking, because our immune system is supposed to protect us against other things. But in MS, our immune system gets confused and it attacks part of our own body, that myelin. So what that means is the signals in my brain and my spinal cord can kind of get short-circuited, or they don't necessarily go where they need to go. And what that means is it could affect, say, how well my legs are working, or it could affect whether I'm able to get a good night's sleep and feel rested, or it could make up feelings that aren't even there. So I itch all the time, for example. I'm not really itching. There's nothing outside that's causing my body to itch. It's a short circuit in my brain that makes me think I'm itching.
So if you're in pain all the time, how can you be a skydiver?
Well, I had to work a lot at it, and one of the things that I do is because my pain isn't due to, say, like a slipped disc or a cut or something that's physically wrong with my body. It's just a wonky signal that I'm getting. I had to learn how to minimize the pain that I experience, and I had to learn to, quite frankly, just not care that I was in pain. And so I use exercise and I use meditation to help me retrain myself so that I just don't care. And I don't, and while I feel it, it doesn't bother me in the same way.
So what advice would you give to someone that wanted to be a skydiver?
It's one of those things that I always tell people, if you think you want to do a skydive, do it. If you don't think you want to do it, then listen to your intuition. Don't do it. But if you want to become a skydiver, then find yourself a drop zone that's nearby. And so that's a place where you can learn to become a skydiver, and then be prepared to spend a whole lot of time doing it, because it's not just a hobby you can dip into and out of. Because when you take a long time in between skydives, your body tends to forget how to do it correctly.
Okay. So it says here that you have a podcast like me. Can you tell me what it's about?
Excuse me, sure. My podcast is called Your Life Lived Well, and it's all about how to handle all of the non-medical things that come along with living with a chronic health condition. So most of us, when we all have to learn how to be sick, right? And you learn by observing other people around you and by being sick when you're a kid and how they react to you, right? And the thing with normal sickness is something happens, you feel bad about it, you groan, you laze around, you take your meds, and in a few days or weeks you're back to normal, right? And you're well again. And that works really well. It's called the acute care model, and it works really well for that kind of sickness. But we have to learn different rules if we're always going to be sick. Because if I felt bad about myself and laid around and didn't do anything all the time, well, I'm not going to get better on the other side, right? So I would not have a good life if that were the case. So when we live with a chronic illness, we have to learn to be more creative, and we have to learn to figure out ways to still find good things in our life, even though we're carrying around something that's not too fun.
So how can someone find and listen to your podcast?
Well, they can search Your Life Lived Well on any of the major podcast platforms. They can go to yourlifelivedwell.co, and that has links to my podcast, links to my guest appearances on other podcasts. It's got a link for my book,
Nice.
The classes that I do, and it's even got a 30-second commercial there for the book that's me in Freefall.
Okay. So what's the craziest thing that has happened while you were doing your passion?
Wow. There's a lot of silly things that happen sometimes. One time I was doing a four-way jump. So that's where we four of us jump together, and we get together and we do different formations as we're falling through the air. And a guy came in, and he didn't do anything wrong, but he came in at a little funny angle and came in a little hot. That means a little fast. He was a fairly new jumper. And so he came in and he docked right here, and he tore my right bicep there in Freefall. And I thought I was going to pass out, because you know what happens when the pain suddenly hits when you have a catastrophic injury. And so I managed to shake it off and finish the jump and deploy my parachute. And I was concerned because I have to deploy my parachute with my right arm, and I didn't know how well that was going to work. So managed to do it and land all right, but that was kind of sketchy.
Wow. So, what was the biggest mistake you ever made, and how did it change you as a person?
Wow. You can't live for a few decades without having some really big mistakes. And I guess one of the things that I had a challenge with was I didn't fully appreciate all the ways that my MS was going to affect me. And I thought that I could just kind of grunt my way through it and not adapt to it. And so that caused some problems in my life for a long time. And I had to relearn how to do a lot of different things just so I could still get what I wanted out of life and still accommodate the limitations that the MS sometimes puts on them.
Okay. Now, can you tell me that one story? Remember, this is a kid show, but that one story, well, that you're not supposed to tell me about. Come on, you can tell me.
Okay. I will indulge with this, and I may get in trouble for telling you this, but so one of my very earliest memories as a little kid was in Thanksgiving time. And I had a big extended family, and we would all go down to the small town where my grandmother and her brothers and sister lived, and everybody would get together. And after Thanksgiving that evening, my Uncle Claude, who was a character, and you will see why I say this in a moment, would sit down and he would take out his teeth, kick back in his recliner with his old dog beside him, and he'd tell stories. And that day he told me, so I'm sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of him, just listening to his stories. And he said the night before, he heard a sound up on the roof. And he thought that was a burglar, and someone was trying to break in. And so he grabbed his shotgun, and he ran outside in his long johns, and he squeezed off a couple of rounds onto the roof, and he heard a yelp and a thud, and a body rolled off, and it was Santa Claus. And my Uncle Claude told me, and here's a direct quote, "I shot Santa's ass off, and now he's dead." And I believed him. I believed him. And I could not understand why Christmas happened and Santa still came and all the adults were acting like nothing had happened. But I knew Uncle Claude had shot Santa. So there's a story for you.
Well, that's funny. So, is there anything else you think my listeners should know about you?
The only thing I would say is I'm not unusual. I mean, yeah, I'm jumping out of airplanes and stuff, but half of all Americans now live with a chronic illness, and most of them are ones that you can't see around you. And so what I wanted to say is just encourage other people to be kinder to one another and to give each other a little more grace, and to understand that many of us are fighting these issues that you can't see. And that sooner or later, almost all of us will be there.
So, do you have a website or Facebook for my listeners to follow you?
Yeah, they can go to yourlifelivedwell.co, and all the links for social media are right there on that page. So I've tried to make it really easy for people.
Okay. Well, what is that one question that you think I forgot to ask you?
Well, you've done a really nice job. So I want to compliment you on that. I guess, I said the thing about being okay. Here's one thing that we can say. So I focus on how to help people live well, right? And so if you were to ask me what's the number one thing you can do to improve your quality of life,
What is it?
I would say be kinder to yourself. Because I know, just like everybody else, sometimes you really get down on yourself, and I get really down on myself, and we all do that. And I want people to remember that you have to have a relationship with yourself just like you do with other people. And sometimes we treat ourselves in ways that we would never tolerate from somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we really get down on ourselves. So don't do that. And I know it's easier said than done. So when you start doing that, just say, okay, I know, I recognize that, now let's move on, right?
Okay.
And just keep going. So don't let yourself get down on yourself so much.
Okay.
And you got to practice it.
And thank you, Kevin, for being my special guest. Can you stick around for Math Corners?
Oh, I would love to. I love math.
skydiversmithlaw.com.
You can call him at 407-801-2667.
Wait, you are not Chuck.
My dad can help when people get hurt. He loves to help people.
If you are ever injured at work or in a car accident, you should call my friend Chuck.
You can call him at 407-801-2667.
That website again is cwsmithlaw.com.
Offices, Orlando.
Does it actually have that much W's?
Tiberius' favorite subject, it's Math Corners!
And now it's time for Math Corners. Thank you so much, Kevin, for helping me with Math Corners. Today, we're going to talk about spirographs. Wait, what does a spirograph have to do with math? Actually rhymes. So, my dad gave me a spirograph a while back, and I really have fun with it, with making like different patterns and shapes. He said that it was making curves based on the circumference of the circle. So, let's say the large circle has 96 teeth and the smaller circle has a different number of teeth. If you take the smaller circle and mark the number of teeth over 96, you get a fraction. So, if the smaller circle has 63 teeth, then you have to reduce the fraction 63 over 96 because it can be reduced. If you divide that by 3 over 3, you get 21 over 32. So, that denominator will show you how many times you would have to go around the circle before you complete the entire pattern. So according to that, you have to go around 32 times before the pattern repeats. These patterns are called Hippocoids.
Yeah, they're very cool.
Well, I think the designs are pretty, and I love that it takes math to take them.
Well, one of the coolest things about math is a spirograph gives you the geometry.
And it gives you
of
infinite possibilities.
It does. And any kind of math can be related as an equation or as a picture. Sometimes we got to get, and that's the geometry of it. And I think it's really neat the way you can have these amazing pictures that can also be represented as an equation.
Okay. So Kevin, do you know all about the spirograph and how the patterns that I make?
You know, spirographs have been around for a long time, and
Oh, yeah.
I had one when I was a kid, and it was one of my favorite toys. So, you know, I played with it a lot when I was younger, And when I grew up, and I was really into math as well, and about the time I was in college, there was a new form of math, of geometry, that was starting to become popular, and it's called a fractal. So if you look up Fractal, Fractal, I promise you, if you like spirographs, you will love fractals.
So it's kind of like fraction, but instead of ION, it's AL. That makes sense.
That is it.
So thank you so much, Kevin, for your help with Math Corners.
I'm glad to.
And now it's time for the Heart of a Lion. As you know, we talk about the qualities of living by the heart of a lion, which stands for leadership, integrity, obedience, and nobility. This week, we're going to talk about nobility. For me, I think nobility is remembering we are God's special possessions and acting in a noble way, showing courage and honor. The qualities of nobility are goodness, virtue, honor, generosity, and selflessness. All of that turns into nobility. What I saw this week was when I was inside of my school, we were doing a project for a Christmas ornament, and I got to pick who I wanted to give it to. Well, of course, I chose my BFF, Cash Tarbell, because he's really important to me and my family. So I made him the ornament, and I was being selfless because instead of the obvious answer to give it to my parents, which is what everyone else did, I give it to my friend. So it was possible that my parents would be hurt or upset, but I had to go with my heart. And guess what? On the last day of school, before Christmas break, he gave me a gift and told me to open it after the half day of school on Discord where we get to see each other. So I opened it up to see a Roblox gift card for $25 with a note saying that we are really good to each other. That was very selfless in Cash and his parents as well. So
that
Kevin.
was a really nice gift.
So Kevin, did you see or use nobility at all this week?
You know, I wish I would have. Nobility is really rare. And truthfully, I've been working at home, and my dog and my cat aren't really very noble. They like to pick on each other. So
That's funny.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Well, of all
And
of the
it's
Heart
really
of a Lion
funny.
virtues, which is your
Yeah.
favorite?
You know, I'd have to go with integrity. I think that's a really crucial one for me personally. And it's a difficult one to live up to, and sometimes we don't always, but we should try. And when we don't, we should be willing to acknowledge it and try to set things right. So I'm a big fan of integrity.
Okay. Well, we should always try and be lion strong in everything we do, shouldn't we?
Yes, we should.
MidState Fire has been providing top quality fire equipment services for 3 generations to the Central Florida area. Don't wait for an emergency to repair. Call MidState Fire today at 407-246-8855. Get your fire extinguishers and emergency lighting for both your home and businesses by visiting www.midstatefire.com. That number again is 407-246-8855.
Hey, that's our show, folks. I want to thank the one, the only, the amazing Dr. Kevin Payne for being on my show.
I have been delighted to be here. And
It
you
has
have
been
a
so
gracious
much fun
host.
talking with you today. I hope one day I will be able to jump out of a plane.
Well, keep in touch, and if you decide you want to do it, I will be happy to jump with you.
Sweet. Also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tiberius Show, and please be sure to visit The Tiberius Show on YouTube and subscribe. Also, be sure to listen to us next week on The Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy!
The Tiberius Show is not filmed in front of a live studio audience. Executive producer Joseph Boy, production editor Pierre Laguerre, Green Room manager Danny Boy, and your program host Tiberius Boy. The Tiberius Show is copyright 2018.